Jake Tapper, our world lead now. Vladimir Putin appears to be getting Russia ready for some sort of major military confrontation. Russian TV aired images of nuclear survival drills held across the country this month, and a government spokesman said Russia is updating its bomb shelters. This comes, of course, as the White House is blaming Moscow for major hacks into the DNC and U.S. voter registration systems, as well as the release, of course, of stolen Clinton campaign emails. Joining me now to discuss this all is the former director of the CIA and the National Security Agency under President George W. Bush, retired four-star General Michael Hayden. General Hayden, thanks so much for being here.
Thanks, Jake.
So why do you think Russia is doing this? You used to be the top spy for this nation. Take us inside Vladimir Putin's head. What is the end game here? Does he want a war?
No, of course he doesn't want a war, but he does want to beat his chest. There's a bit of geopolitical theater going on here. So he sends what passes for an aircraft carrier in the Russian Navy, and I'm being generous calling it a carrier, through the English Channel because it just attracts all sorts of attention. But there's not a whole lot of substance behind that movement. Now, there is substance with what he's doing in Syria, and there, with a modest application of military force and frankly the daring to use it, he's actually changed the balance of forces in that war.
So the director of the National Intelligence, retired General James Clapper, said just moments ago, he was asked about a no-fly zone, which would be an area in Syria where people could go theoretically and be protected because there wouldn't be bombardments, there wouldn't be bombings coming in. And he said one of the reasons why he didn't necessarily support a no-fly zone is because if the U.S. had one in Syria, he wouldn't put it past Putin to not shoot down an American aircraft.
Well, that's a great and serious concern, and I understand why Jim brought it up, and frankly, it would have been a lot easier to do about 15 months ago before the Russian Air Force arrived, which was a policy that had been suggested and rejected by the folks across the park. But Jake, let me turn that a little bit on its head, all right? So are we now going to live in a world in which, in any circumstance in which the Russians are willing to risk a confrontation, we aren't and are willing to back down? Think of the implications of that. And so I don't know that we should automatically reject something that may have real merit for us to do, even though it does impose some risk.
Interesting. I want to get a reaction to Donald Trump's comments at the last debate about whether or not the Russians are hacking into Clinton campaign files in the DNC. Take a listen.
Yeah.
She has no idea whether it's Russia, China, or anybody else.
I am not quoting myself.
No idea.
I am quoting
Hillary, you
17,
have no idea.
17 do you doubt 17
our
military
has
and
no
civilian agencies? Well,
yeah,
he'd rather believe.
I doubt it.
Donald Trump says we have no idea. Hillary Clinton says 17 intelligence agencies say that we do.
And Jim Clapper says we have high confidence that this was done by the Russians, and we assess that it would not have been done without the approval of the highest levels of the Russian state. So what you have is a campaign, a candidate for president. Now, I understand this is a politically inconvenient reality for him because he wants to use the content of the emails in the campaign, and I totally understand that, but he undercuts that argument because of the source. So the right answer would have been, it doesn't matter where they came from, we need to focus on what they say. But what he chose to say was he rejected the high confidence judgment of the American intelligence community because it was politically inconvenient to him. That's scary.
Well, and it's not just Donald Trump. Take a listen to former New York Mayor Rudy Giuliani saying that he finds WikiLeaks very refreshing, and Republican Congressman Jeff Duncan of South Carolina tweeting, quote, "Let me be here, thank God for WikiLeaks, doing the job that mainstream media won't." What do you think when you hear Republicans saying nice things about WikiLeaks?
Well, I see them abandoning conservative or national security credentials for the transient advantage of a political moment. It's a bit disappointing. I think Marco Rubio actually has a better sight picture of this. Step back from this, folks. Look at exactly what's going on. Now, again, Jake, the contents reveal some things we ought to talk about as a people. But that doesn't in any way give merit to Julian Assange, WikiLeaks, the Russian Federation, or the Russian security services.
Let me ask you a question. Mike Morrell, who was the deputy acting CIA director for a while and has endorsed Hillary Clinton, he wrote an op-ed in which he said he thought Donald Trump was basically an unwitting agent of the Russians. Do you agree?
I don't know if I'd go that far, but I understand why Michael said it. the phrase in Russian espionage lore about useful idiots. I mean, people who don't know what they're doing, but then do things that seem to fit what the Russians would like them to do. Look, I don't know why Mr.
Are you
Trump,
calling Donald Trump
I did
a
not.
useful
I
idiot?
did not. I simply referred to what the Russians have a reference to.
Implying it.
But he's doing things. He's refusing to criticize Putin. He doesn't talk about Putin in the Ukraine. Let me get down to a really basic thing that had to contradict what he got in his intelligence briefings. He said the Russians are fighting ISIS. No, they're not. The Russians are bucking up the Assad regime. They are not fighting ISIS. The only way you can get to his policy position is to deny the realities that the American intelligence community are saying exist in the Middle East today.
All right. General Hayden, it's always good to have you on the show. Thanks so much for being here. Appreciate
Thank you.
it. Coming.